This is TWiT.
There's a big story. There's a new Macintosh in town. So we thought that Apple might introduce something at WWDC. You had heard rumors. Now, you can be honest now with us, Rene. Had you actually seen this?
No. So I have heard about as other people have, the rumored MacBook Pro refresh with the 16-point-something inch screen and the return to scissor keys and the inverted T arrow keys and the actual escape, all that sort of stuff. But nobody sort of really knew when that was coming, and maybe it's still shifting around internally. It's hard to tell. But the earliest they could introduce that is WWDC, because we're almost upon it. And if not then usually October is their next Big Mac event, and then the March event after that, but it was hard to tell where it was going to land. So today, instead of that, we got a spec update and keyboard tweak to the existing design of the 13-inch and 15-inch MacBook Pro.
So what we got is up to 8 cores, up to 32 gigs of memory. Is that an upgrade as well? I think it is.
No, so there's two big changes here. One is that the 15-inch is going to 9th generation Coffee Lake Refresh, and yes, Intel is calling it Coffee Lake Refresh. It's flabbergasting.
Nothing more refreshing
that I live in this time
than Coffee Lake.
But it goes up to 8 cores and it goes up to 5 gigahertz in turbo. And I know a lot of people with their benchmark tools get real salty about the thermal constraints of that kind of silicon, Core i9, 8 of them in a computer. And if your workload is not, if you need long sustained workload, you probably want fewer cores and slower speed so that you don't thermally throttle. But there are other people who insist that, even if you have to throw the equivalent of megatons of power behind these things, they have workloads that are not heterogeneous, and they do take advantage of the very, very small micromillisecond adjustments in the temperature and frequency rates, and it does benefit them. And Apple's claiming up to 200% improvements in some workloads like Logic and Final Cut Pro and
that
Maya
i9,
Arnold,
which I bought from a couple of years ago, had a lot of throttling issues, although they were able to fix those in software over time. But you're saying this will be even less. So let's go through the specs, and then I really would like you to talk, Rene, about who should get what.
Okay.
Should
I say the other big change?
Yeah, what's the other big change? Yeah, that's what I want to talk about.
The other change is there's not a new mechanism. It's still a butterfly keyboard, but they've changed the material that the mechanism is made out of. And they say that this should eliminate some of the problems, especially the double repeating characters that some people were saying, but also because they want people to know they're sticky. They apologized previously, and they say they really care about their customers and their experience. They're increasing that the program that they put in place previously for butterfly keyboards to cover all butterfly keyboards. Now the earliest ones and the latest ones, no cost. So if the program is exactly the same, you get the 1 year regardless, but then you get 2 additional years of extended coverage at no cost. And they're making sure that if you do have a repair, it gets done as quickly as possible. And people are quoting 24-hour turnaround times now.
In store, they said, right?
Yeah.
So here you go. Starting price, just before we go too much farther, $27.99. But
prices are the same.
That we can't really just sit on the stock version here. 8th core, 9th generation, 2.3 gigahertz, boost up to 4.8, or would you spend an extra $200 to get 2.4 gigahertz? I mean, it seems like a very minor upgrade.
There are some people who are doing things that, some people dismiss Turbo Boost entirely, and, they just think that it's not worth it. But there are some people who insist that what they are doing has enough very small tasks done repeatedly and often enough, or that the frequency goes up and down fast enough that they do see it in performance. It's not linear in almost every case, but there are some people whose time is literally worth more than their money. And if it's 5%, 10%, 15%, 40%, all those things, they will literally say, take all my money.
Developers would be a good example of this, where compile times, and compile is very much like that, very peaky in CPU usage.
We also, I spoke to the editors who made Desposito, that hugely popular video, and they said that their biggest constraint is time on the phone with their clients.
That's right.
And if they can turn around a video and send it to them on the phone, and they could watch it, and you could say, look, you really shouldn't be doing that Scooby-Doo dance in that scene.
So you think rendering, though, which is a pretty consistent throttle up and stay up, as we saw when the first i9 came out, would that still benefit from? I guess it would be that much a little bit better.
So there's a huge disagreement. There's a lot of people who are really smart who say that the throttling is a throttling. And then there are other people who are really smart who say, no, what you think is a heterogeneous workload isn't. And that within that, like benchmarks are just not granular enough to see it. But within that, there are all sorts of spikes and valleys as the chip goes to 100, then back to 98, then back and the frequency is modulating the entire time. And there is some benefit. I am not smart enough to argue that with either of those people. But other people are putting, $3-4 grand behind that, so they are convinced enough to at least do it.
It's enough to say that it's not clear, and there isn't a general agreement on this. It is only $200, and at least that would mitigate the difference in fixing zombie load. So maybe that extra 5%.
Apple's not turning that on though, and so people are worried about that, but Apple's not turning it on.
These aren't servers. Now I'll tell you one thing I always will do, which is opt for 32 gigs over 16 gigs of memory. Right? Yeah. That's a
and the only difference here is that because Intel still hasn't shipped the low power version of that memory, that they're using the more using the more power hungry.
Yeah.
And I should point out the 13-inch isn't getting 9th generation. I asked why, they wouldn't say, but my understanding is that Intel simply hasn't shipped it yet.
So this is 15-inch only if you're going to get this.
15-inch is the only one that's getting.
Yeah. So
it's getting me.
Now let's talk about the choices of graphics cards, because there are 3, which is interesting. The base model has a Radeon Pro 560X, but you get a Vega 16 or even a Vega 20.
Yeah.
Big difference? Who needs a Vega 20? Or if you don't know if you need it, you don't need it. But if you know if you need it, you should get it.
Yeah, like there are people who use it for intense scientific calculation and for offloading a lot of GPU-bound activities that benefit from them.
And if you have an eGPU, it might be more sensible, instead of spending $350 to put a 20 in the case, just to get an eGPU for maybe $600.
If you travel a lot, you probably want the best possible in the case because you won't be able to upgrade it later. But if you use it at home, then the eGPU is fantastic.
Yeah. And you think I think the 560X is pretty credible. It's not a bad choice.
It's what they had before they put out the Vegas last November.
Right. I guess that's a good point. So this is actually a choice you could have made earlier. Could you get the Vega 20 before, though? I don't think so.
I believe so. The graphics haven't changed.
Okay. Same graphics. All right. Your choice. Storage is always a difficult one, especially because Apple does not give you much of. They really charge a premium for SSD storage, more than the market really justifies now, because SSDs are getting less and less expensive. But don't forget these laptops, everything's soldered in. There's no option to go in there and say, I'm going to replace. As I did, by the way, with my ThinkPad, it had 2 M.2 drives, and after a while, I said, I'm going to replace that 256 gig with a terabyte. It was less than $200. You don't have that option here.
If you're Kyle Wyans, you can do it, but most of us should stay away.
If you're good at desoldering surface-mounted no. So I think a terabyte is a good amount. Remember, you've got a Thunderbolt 3, you've got external storage options.
I went with 2 terabytes, and the reason I did it is that I was doing so much editing at events that I would have to use external drives and on planes, and you're always sort of my anxiety level with the external drives.
It's about anxiety. It is about anxiety.
But now that I'm at 2 terabytes, I have not touched an external drive except for backup.
Yeah,
like in half a year, and I can't tell you the difference it makes. 4 is obscene. 2 is just really offensive.
2 is a lot more expensive. It's $1,000 more. So I'll put 2 in. We'll put 32 gigs. Which graphics card did you put in yours, Mr. Video Editor?
I've got mine before the Vega Pro came out, so I have the one you already have highlighted.
Yeah, but would you get a Vega 20 if you could today?
The results are better. I mean, people who have them, and also apparently the thermal throttling is better with the Vega models as well, because the GPU is offloading more of the work. So
that's a good point. So the processor will be faster as well. Well, there's not much more we can do. You already own, I'm sure, Final Cut and Logic, so let's not waste any money on that. Let's get the final total, Johnny.
Ding, 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 ding.
Ching! $4,549 when we customize it like that. At that point, I'm going to put in the faster processor.
I was going to say, you may as well round it up to an even $5,000.
What else can I do to get it to $5,000? All right, well, there you go. You already ordered one, huh, Rene? Do I have to keep up with the...
No, I have I have the one from so I mean, that's the thing. And some people are so previously Apple wasn't updating when Intel did, and people got real angry. And now Apple has been updating whenever Intel and AMD have been updating. So we had updates last July, last November, and now this May, and people are angry they're updating too much. So I prefer they update whenever the silicon can be updated, because whether I'm buying now or I'm going to buy secondhand or refurbished or later, I always want to have as many options as possible. But yeah, I would love to, but I can't justify doing it again.